We have opened up the conversation of whether he should play the starters versus Buffalo when the 2 seed is possible, but I would say very unlikely. Would you sit him for 2 weeks? Would you play him full tilt versus Buffalo? How would you handle this one coming up next weekend?
I would go for it. I think that the 2 seed is, as long as it's in play, it's worth going for, I think. Because this team hasn't lost a home postseason game in forever. I mean, I could see the other side of the argument saying, hey, this team, you got a lot of guys here that are really beat up, and they could use the rest. And I'm not going to argue against that. I think that's true. But I think that number 2 seed, that's worth fighting for. And yeah. I would play my guys up in Buffalo. Now, the one caveat I would say to this is we're hearing that Lane Johnson might be ready to play this week. And look, I'm not going to try and tell you that Lane Johnson isn't a better right tackle than Fred Johnson. He certainly is. But the long-term weather forecast for Buffalo next weekend is pretty brutal. And if it's really bad and it's really snowy and it's like crazy bad footing and it's treacherous out there, and we've all seen the field in Buffalo in December and January, we know what it can be like. If those are the conditions you're going to be playing in, then in my view, Lane Johnson ain't playing. You're not going to send him out there. You're not going to send him out there with coming off a foot injury to play on a bad field. I wouldn't do that.
Wow.
So I mean, that's everybody else.
I didn't think about that.
If they can play, they can play. In my view, because I think the number 2 is worth playing for as long as it's there and it's there. But I would not. If the conditions are now, listen. If the conditions are okay.
That field is that pro turf stuff, but the way that the wind whips around and
it's saying rain
can
with
freeze
snow
it up
mixing in and the winds around.
Yeah, I mean,
that's
they're talking about a lot of snow mixed in with freezing rain, and I mean Lane Johnson. I don't want to bring him back coming off a Liz Frank injury and put him on a bad field like that.
Yeah.
So he's the one guy that I would opt to the side of caution and not play him. But everybody else I would play, and I would play it to win. And then we'll reassess after that. We'll reassess about how you're going to approach Washington.
Right.
Listen, you might be able to beat Washington with your backups anyway. But I mean this week I would play all out.
Yep.